Genma Shiranui, the most iconic special Jonin in the Naruto series, the man who wears his headband as a bandana and backwards, and the man who always has a toothpick in his mouth, which he occasionally uses to spit against kunais and stop them midair. Pretty based. But what exactly happened to Genma after the Naruto war arc? There isn't a whole lot of information about many characters after the war, but Genma's story is actually quite interesting. It's probably more interesting than everything that happened to him in the regular series, so let me tell you that story. If you don't remember, Genma was the proctor of the finals of the Chunin Exams. He also fought against the Sound 4 alongside Raido and lost to them, but they were out of chakra and the Sound 4 used the second seed of the curse mark. It was a 4v2, kind of unfair, and in the war arc, Genma is assigned to the Mizukage's battalion, which they end up fighting against Black Zetsu to stop him from getting to the feudal lords. Genma doesn't get a lot of screen time in the series, unfortunately, because he's a very cool character, but he was one of the 3 members of the Hokage Guard, instituted by Minato himself. So if Minato chose this dude to protect him, and even taught the guy the Flying Raijin, it means there was something special to this guy, and yes, we can definitely see that after the war arc. Because during the war itself, unfortunately, Genma doesn't get a lot to do. He fights against the Black Zetsu alongside the battalion there, they have a stalemate. Black Zetsu is using those large-scale wood-style deep forest emergence attacks. And after they defeat Black Zetsu, Genma, alongside his 2 teammates from the Hokage Guard, Raido and Iwashi, teleport Mei to where Madara is so that the 5 Kage can fight against him. And if they weren't around, they wouldn't be able to teleport Mei there, and so the 5 Kage wouldn't be the 5 Kage, it would be just 4 of them. After that, Genma, alongside other Jonins and special Jonins, chase after the half-split body of Edo Tensei Mu, which they actually end up catching up to, but Itachi releases the Edo Tensei Jutsu, and Mu just kinda goes away like every other Edo Tensei except for Madara. And after that, we only see Genma again once in the anime when he's containing a crowd of people that want to see Naruto outside of the Leaf Village. But after the war ends is when Genma's story starts to get interesting. He continues as captain of the Hokage Guard, and Kakashi, the 6th Hokage, promotes Genma and also Raido to the Jonin rank. Those 2 were previously special Jonin, which is a lower rank than Jonin. And Kakashi also promotes Iwashi, who was a Chunin, to the special Jonin rank. And it's well deserved. Genma was strong enough to stalemate Baki back in Naruto Part 1. And Baki was already a Jonin, and he stomped Hayate, who was a special Jonin just like Genma himself, so Genma definitely had the ability to fight against the Jonin already, and being in the Hokage Guard means you just have to be very powerful and well-rounded, meaning that, yeah, he should be a Jonin and Kakashi promotes him to it. Obviously, this is also out of necessity because most ninjas from the Leaf Village and also from the entire world died in the 4th Great Ninja War. I made a video counting how many ninjas actually died from the Alliance, and it's kinda crazy. So they were definitely in need of Jonins, but Genma is a very good person to be promoted to that rank because he actually deserves it. Now, the first years of Kakashi's reign as Hokage are pretty turbulent. He starts to institute several new policies that are going to develop the Leaf Village in terms of technology, infrastructure, and everything, and that kinda collides against several people that have other interests. People that wish to see the status quo be maintained, so Kakashi has to do a lot of political maneuvering in order to develop the Leaf Village itself. Obviously, those were times of peace, so it wasn't as if there's an entire war or an organization hunting down Bijus that's going to interfere with things, but even with the 5 nations collaborating with each other, there were still ninjas, organizations, and other entities that wished to see the Hokage dead, and so Genma knew he'd have to become more powerful. Yes, the Leaf Village had 2 demigods working for them, Naruto and Sasuke, but because they lost so many ninjas during the war, the ones who remained had to become more powerful, and Genma and the others from the Guard, being the guards of the Hokage, had to be even more powerful. So they trained. especially Genma. And with his hard training, Genma managed to develop an extremely powerful jutsu. Now, the word develop may not be the correct one to use here. It's more like he perfected a jutsu he already used before. You see, Raido, Genma, and Iwashi were only able to use the Flying Raijin together when they combined their powers. Minato taught the three that when they were guarding him, but they were never able to use the Flying Raijin by itself. Now, using the Flying Raijin, even if you have to combine your powers, is pretty useful. Teleporting is always going to be an advantage, even if you can't use that for combat. So much so that obviously they had Tsunade marked with a Flying Raijin mark, and that's why they were able to bring Mei to the 5 Kage vs. Madara fight anyways. But what made Minato so formidable with a Flying Raijin was the fact that he could spam the jutsu by himself and use it in combat, making him the fastest ninja alive. On top of Minato already being extremely physically fast, he could also teleport. And with pretty much this jutsu and the Rasengan, Minato became the strongest ninja of his generation. And that's exactly what Genma did here. After a couple of years of extensive training, Genma managed to develop the Flying Raijin enough so that he could use it by himself. Meaning that he alone could mark places, teleport to places, and use the jutsu in combat. Now, obviously, Genma wasn't as talented as Minato was. He couldn't spam the jutsu quite as much as Minato used to during his fights. But Genma learned how to mark things, including his enemies and teleporting by himself, as well as several combat tactics involving the Flying Raijin jutsu. And that jutsu came extremely in handy when one day Kakashi, the 6th Hokage, was meeting with the leader of the Grass Village and negotiating terms of trade with the Land of Grass, which is a neighbor of the Land of Fire, when a criminal organization of several ninjas from these satellite villages attacked this meeting place, which was at the Land of Grass, by the way. That organization was called Ikido, and they were fighting for more autonomy from these smaller nations around the world. Now that the 5 major nations were allies, they could pretty much do anything they wanted to the smaller nations. The only thing stopping them from completely taking them over was their morals. Because unlike before, when the 5 major nations established allies within those smaller nations, maintaining this balance of power so that they could offset each other, now the 5 nations themselves are all allies. In theory, they could simply impose their will upon the smaller villages. Now, they didn't do that, and they wouldn't even try to do that, because the other major nations would frown upon preying on smaller nations. But Ikido thought, regardless, the smaller villages should have more of a say in the world. The 5 Kage were obviously much more powerful than the ninjas from those villages, and now that even Pain or Nagato or the god of the Rain Village was dead, there was nobody really that could try to compete against the 5 major villages. And so they tried to assassinate Kakashi to prove a point and try to throw the major villages into this state of unrest, and even frame the Grass Village in the process. But they weren't expecting Genma Shiranui to be there. Well, actually they were, because they knew who the Hokage Guard was, but they weren't expecting him to be so powerful. When Ikido attacks that summit, they have about 30 ninjas in their platoon. They're rogue ninjas from smaller nations, but they range from high Chunin to low Jonin level. But as soon as they attack, Genma had already marked the table they were holding the summit on. He touches Kakashi on the shoulder and teleports him away to safety. Comes back to the mark he had put on the table and fights against the battalion himself, alongside the others that were present, of course. Genma takes out by himself half of the Ikido fighters, and one of the cool things he did with the Flying Raijin is that he marked his own toothpick. So when he spat the toothpick to kill one of the enemies, he teleported to it and slashed at another enemy that was behind the one he had just hit with a toothpick. And because Genma and also the other members from the guard were so superior to Ikido, they managed to capture a couple of them, including the leader of the assaults, and took them back to the Leaf Village to questioning. Ibiki obviously did a terrific job, and they managed to pretty much get everything they needed to destroy this organization. Kakashi, realizing that Genma had gotten extremely powerful, sends him alongside Sasuke Uchiha to take care of Ikido. Usually Sasuke would take care of these types of things by himself, hunting down underground criminals, dismantling organizations like that. But he sends Genma because he figured he might as well finish the job he started during the summit. And Genma having the Flying Raijin could take Sasuke to several places around the fire and beyond that he had marked, and even bring Sasuke back if there was any need to. Oh yeah, Sasuke is really fast, he can travel just by moving really quickly, but you never know, maybe you'd have to bring someone else, and the Flying Raijin is just going to assist that a lot. And bear in mind, this is about 5 years after Kakashi becomes Hokage, so Sasuke is in his early 20s, while Genma is in his late 30s. Genma was 33 in Naruto Shippuden, so he would be 38 here, and Sasuke would be around 21. And they have a very interesting conversation while they're going on their mission, because if you don't remember, Genma was the proctor for the Sasuke vs. Gaara fight, and Genma was the one who gave Sasuke the mission to chase after Gaara during the Orochimaru invasion of the village. So Genma is obviously pretty impressed by how much Sasuke has evolved. Not that he didn't know about it, but seeing it firsthand is something different. The powers of the Rinnegan and the legendary power of the Uchiha clan is something that Genma is extremely impressed with. And he remembers that, oh, I was impressed when he used the Chidori during the Chunin Exams there, and the things that he's doing right now is just like insane. And Sasuke even tells him, did you really think I could take Gaara on? Even though he was the Jinchuriki of the One Tail? And Genma was like, yeah, I thought you had it covered. And then Sasuke says, well, I kinda didn't, but it doesn't matter. And then he remembers that Naruto was the one to save him, but he doesn't want to admit that. It's kind of a funny scene. Genma also talks about how he was disappointed that Sasuke left for Orochimaru and didn't really appreciate that the only Uchiha in the village had left. And Sasuke obviously feels ashamed, but regardless they move on with the mission. And with Sasuke there, they both managed to clean out Ikido very easily. Unlike Genma in the summit, Sasuke spares most of the guys they encounter and brings them back to the Leaf Village to be prisoners. And Kakashi also manages to smooth things over with the smaller satellite villages and make better deals with them so they feel more included in the entire new system that is being formed around the 5 major nations that are now allies. A couple more years pass, and at this point, the village has been very much stabilized by Kakashi, who is now a very popular Hokage. And it seems like not a lot of things are happening, right? Genma is not really necessary as the Hokage Guard because there's a lot of peace around. It doesn't really feel like there's anybody that's going to attack the Hokage. There are barely any missions left to go, but obviously Kakashi still sends Genma on difficult missions. Genma was sent to a very small island off the coast of the Land of Fire, an island that was suffering a lot with its volcano and earthquakes. It was sent to protect the villagers from the natural disasters that were going on over there if it were to get worse, but he ended up finding out that it was actually a ninja using magma style to mess up with the volcano. A guy from the Stone Village that didn't really like the new peace in the world, especially with the Leaf Village, because Minato the Yellow Flash had killed his mom and his dad during the Third Great Ninja War, and so he had a lot of resentment towards the Leaf Village itself. And upon learning that the former Hokage Guard to Minato, the guy Minato chose himself to be his guard, and even taught his signature jutsu, was sent to help this village, using his cursed teleportation jutsu to bring people out of wreckages, to facilitate supply chains around the village, he was infuriated. And so he tried to completely destroy the small island and the people in it. There's a small village of about 1,000 people or so, which Genma was helping out there, and the stone ninja, who was called Kayushi, used a powerful magma-style jutsu to essentially awaken the volcano of the island to its utmost potential, to go for a full eruption. Now with the Flying Raijin, Genma was able to take most of the inhabitants to safety, and he also had a pretty massive fight against the Stone Ninja in the middle of lava and the destroyed little village of the island. A fight that he was able to win, but he was extremely hurt. A stream of lava hit the lower section of his torso and penetrated deep into his body, hitting vital organs. After defeating the Stone Ninja, eliminating him, he was losing consciousness, but he was still able to use the Flying Raijin and return to the Leaf Village in critical condition, and as he arrived there from his teleportation, he passed out. He was brought to the hospital, and Sakura was the one in charge of healing Genma. Now, the wounds he sustained were extensive. Sakura had to use all the knowledge she got from Tsunade, and even more that she learned later on, alongside her 100 healing seal, to make sure Genma wouldn't die. But in order to fully heal the guy, because there was essentially a hole in his torso, she had to use that white Zetsu Hashirama cells material. Similar to what Tsunade uses to remake Naruto's right arm after his fight against Sasuke. And Sakura manages to do so, saving Genma's life. He had to stay almost a month in the hospital, but after that ordeal, he had a pretty large patch of Hashirama cells attached to him. Permanently. Sakura only attempted that type of treatment on Genma because she knew Genma had a very powerful physique and could handle the Hashirama cells. Otherwise, she wouldn't even try to. That type of treatment only worked if you're a powerful ninja with a strong chakra. Otherwise, the Hashirama cells would consume you, but Genma resisted. And because of that, he actually became more powerful with the new Hashirama cells. He got physically stronger, faster, his chakra got more powerful and more voluminous, which allowed him to use the Flying Raijin even more effectively, being able to spam it more. And because of that newfound strength, Genma became one of the strongest ninjas active in the Leaf Village. After Naruto, Sasuke, Kakashi, Sakura, and a couple of others, Genma was by far the most powerful and famous ninja at that point, about 10 years into Kakashi's reign as the Hokage. He kept on sending Genma to very difficult missions whenever they appeared, and with the additional boost of the Hashirama cells, Genma excelled on them. He even acquired the ability to use a very small-scale version of wood style. Because of the Hashirama cells, he managed to create small pieces of wood, which ironically he mostly used to create new toothpicks and spit them. He perfected that technique and used it to create even more of the toothpicks that he could mark with a Flying Raijin mark and send them all around the battlefield, kind of like how Minato did with his kunais back in the day, so that Genma would be able to teleport all around with extreme speed and take care of hundreds of enemies at the same time if necessary. He would create the small toothpicks with a wood-style jutsu, mark them very quick, spread them around, and wreak havoc. And after many successful S-rank missions, came the day that Kakashi passed the mantle of Hokage to Naruto. And with that also came Kakashi's retirement from shinobi life. As you can see in Naruto chapter 700, Kakashi is retired with Guy in a bathhouse, and Genma was also a couple of years older than Kakashi, so when his Hokage decides to retire, he thinks to himself, well, I think I've done my fair share. I've already got a lot of money from all the S-rank and A-rank missions that I fulfill over the years. I guess it's time to retire as well. And he even thinks that Naruto is so powerful that he wouldn't even need a guard, and he can create shadow clones that can be his guards anyway, so Genma felt almost inadequate to be the guard of Naruto Uzumaki, the new god of shinobi. And where does Genma decide to go after he retires? Well, the first place he passes by is going to be the Mist Village. Because you see, when he fought alongside Mei Terumi during the 4th Great Ninja War, he found her quite attractive, and Mei was around her age. Now, at the time, Genma just assumed Mei was married or had a boyfriend or something, and they were also in the middle of a war, so approaching her would be very inappropriate. When the war ended and he found out no, she was single, he figured she'd be too much for him to handle. After all, she was the Kage of her village, and even if that relationship was to work, it'd have to be a long-distance one, even though he has a Flying Raijin, so that could be mitigated. Once he learned to use it by himself, that is, obviously. He wouldn't use Raido and Iwashi to teleport to his girlfriend. But after he retired, he also found out Mei was still single. So he went after her in the Mist Village, when she was no longer the Kage there. It was Chojuro. They went out for a couple of weeks, but things didn't turn out so great. Their personalities didn't match. Mei was far too demanding of Genma, and Genma was always a more relaxed guy. So Genma broke up with her in amicable terms, even though Mei still resents him for that. And he left the Mist Village. After that, not much is known about him, but I hope you found this story interesting. It was difficult to find all this information. The sources for this video are all listed in the description below. Definitely leave a like, subscribe, and ring notifications if you enjoyed it and if you learned something new. Watch the video showing up on your screen right now for more Naruto content just like this, and thank you so much for watching.